Welcome back to Puddle of Porridge, where today we are going to be looking at another Guild Wars 2 Training Wheels build. This time we're going to be looking at the Elementalist and doing what we usually do. We are going to slowly strip back the training wheels in future videos using this build as a foundation. In this video we are going to be covering one of my most recommended builds to my friends at least, as this not only gives us two viable ways of play, one that is very safe and one that is a little bit more daring and a little bit more high damage, to kind of ease you in to Elementalist gameplay. As a quick reminder, these training wheels builds are not for high-end content, they are not for structured PvE or ranked PvP, at least for the most part. Especially these core builds will be very useful in the open world and when you're exploring, making them excellent for leveling tools and to enter into X-Packs. So without any further delay, let's head on over to the Lions Arch training area and we will take a look at this build. So here we are in the Lions Arch training arena and we're going to cover our Elementalist training wheels build. Now, if you've played Guild Wars 2 for any length of time, you might have heard of a Fresh Air Ellie. This is basically that, but with a few very minor adjustments. Fresh Air Ellies are extremely common in the game. The core of this, the trait lines, are not things that I've specifically made up myself. They're not a combination that I've stumbled upon. But how I'm going to demonstrate on how to play this is what is going to make it a training wheels build. First off is the weapons. We are going to mainly be focusing on our scepter skills, and in our offhand we are going to be using a staff, because the whole point of this as a training wheels build is that we want to stay somewhat at a distance, but how we play with a staff and how we play with a scepter and focus is going to be slightly different. Next up is the skills. What we want out of this build are two key skills here, and it's these two. Our Glyph of Elementals and our Lesser Glyph of Elementals. And what these skills do is it basically just allows us to summon a minion. The regular Glyph of Elementals is our elite skill. It allows us to summon a minion that we have some control over. We can activate a skill on it, which will perform a particular effect. For example, a fire elemental will fire many bolts of, well, flames, and they will deal damage. If you summon an air elemental, these are more ranged oriented and will fire bolts of lightning that will stun your target, which is really, really good at breaking down those defiance bars. Our lesser glyph of elementals allows us to summon a smaller elemental that we have no real control over, but we can keep casting this spell to have many elementals on our side. Next up is our healing skill. We have the Signet of Restoration if we are using our scepter. Our scepter is going to attack quick enough for us to get our heals per cast to be effective. However, if we swap over to our staff, our spells are going to be a lot slower to cast, although at a longer range. So we're going to get a lot less out of this signet. If we are running a staff, I would actually recommend swapping out to another healing ability. Personally, I'm going to go with Glyph of Elemental Harmony, as this is a nice solid singular heal that will provide us with a different boon depending on what element we're in. So that's the skills covered. Largely, we have two extras which are free to swap out and change however we like. I have 2 stone breaks here because I like to keep them on hand with the very squishy Elementalist. But these two are completely up to you to choose from. They're for you to bend and flex and use whatever way you like, depending on what playstyle you want at the time. And with the skills covered, let's start talking about the traits. Let's take a look at our trait lines, starting with the backbone of this build, and that is fire. Fire, very simply, will allow us to just do more damage, whether that's condition damage or power damage while running this build, which is great for these training wheels builds as they are all going to be hybrids, allowing us to largely focus on whatever damage we like, so we can experiment about as you level up. First off, we have trait 1, which is burning precision, more burning, more crit chance, more damage. It's very simple. You don't need to think about it. It's in the background. Next up is power overwhelming. This gives us a bonus to power when we hit 10 stacks of might, which just means we're doing more damage. We gain even more power in fire attunement, which we're going to spend a lot of time in, so we're just dealing even more damage. This is a very good way to keep your damage up, especially when you're still leveling or still running through your 1 to 80 experience. Alternatively, if you want a more defensive build, Smothering Auras is also handy as it can help keep those conditions off you and your allies if you're playing in a group by simply popping your auras, which you'll have some access to on both staff and scepter focus. Finally, and I'm probably going to mess up the pronunciation of this trait, is Pyronance's Puissance. This trait is kind of where this whole build comes together, as every time we use a fire attune skill, we're going to gain a stack of might. That's the most important thing, because on Scepter, we're going to stick on really high stacks of might, basically all the time. It's going to give us a huge damage boost to both our condition damage and to our power damage. This also means we are in control of keeping power overwhelming up near constantly. Whenever we're in combat, we'll have this up, which means we're going to get even more damage. And that's it. That's our fire. Let's move on to the next trait line. Our next trait line is Arcane. Now Arcane is largely based around swapping attunements and giving us bonuses based on what attunements we're in. We can be very flexible with this trait line. It's not really too set in its ways, but I'm going to go through the variations that I use personally. First off is renewing stamina. We crit, we gain vigor, which lets us dodge a bit more. It's quite handy to have in the background, especially because we have our increased chance of critting with our, well, burning precision. However, arcane precision also synergizes well with that if you want to do a bit more damage, as if you're in fire attunement and trying to trigger off that burning precision, you're going to trigger an extra stack of burning while using arcane precision as well. So you're going to just be tipping over that damage a little bit more. Arcane restoration is also a very good one. If you're in a bit of a tight spot, you can just cycle through a few attunements and give yourself a little bit of a health boost. It's not a big health boost, which is why I mentioned it last. I'd preferably take one of the other two myself, largely because we're going to be spending a lot of time in one or two attunements instead of cycling through all of them. There's a time and a place for this last one. This build isn't the one, but if you wish to take it to get that little bit of background healing, feel free. Next up is final shielding. This is very helpful as when you use an elite skill, we get a free shield. So we're going to be casting this whenever we want, well, as often as we want, and as often as we can, I should rather say. And we just get a free shield with it. It's a fire and forget shield. It's going to block damage, and when it takes too much damage, it's going to pop. However, any of these kind of work well. I personally prefer that shield. I really like it. It's got me out of a lot of tough scrapes in the past. However, if you prefer, you could take Elemental Lockdown, which if we disable a foe, which we can do with a few skills on our bar, especially with
Might
Lightning,
makes
we
me
have a
right.
knockdown, and with Air Attunement, we have Comet. We can actually get a little bit of a boost, a little bit of a bonus out of stopping our foe. However, we're not really going to be doing that in fire attunements, and we're not getting the extra might. This is if you want to get that very conditional fury or very conditional regeneration. Arcane restoration. This is if you're going to be encountering other players out in the open world that you want to help with. If you teamed up with people, I'd swap the shield out for this one, as you know, you never know when someone's going down, and being able to revive people is always just it's always just handy. You're going to be better at helping out your team. That's what we all want at the end of the day if we're playing with a friend. So if you are with a group or a party, Arcane Resurrection's right there. If not, Final Shielding is what I'd always advise with this build. Finally, we want Evasive Arcana. Now this one's very simple. We dodge roll, we perform a special attack. For the most part, this isn't going to be useful, but if you're in a tight spot, you can always swap over to water, like we're in right now, and I've clicked over to the water equivalent, which is a very quick heal and a Condi Cleanse. You get Cleansing Wave just off the bat. I will demonstrate later when we have the golem up. It's quite handy. Although it does have effects with the others, I don't think they're quite as useful. I would advise not really wasting your evasions unless you really need to dodge an attack. Don't just take the hit. But having this in your back pocket as a quick heal is always helpful. The other versions are going to do a little bit more damage and give you a little condition damage boost depending on which one you're using, but the healing one is the best that you're going to get, especially if you're using Scepter and you're a little bit closer, because you want that little extra healing. As an Elementalist, you're going to have a lot of trouble in certain areas, especially when you're getting used to the class, as you're going to have less health than your other caster friends. You've got the least health in the game as an Ellie, so having a heal on hand on a dodge roll, always useful. So our last trait line is air. Now air is based around increasing our mobility and increasing our crit chance. The reason why we want this is for the crit chance. It's quite simple. So let's go over some of the key players here. Zephyr's speed, as we shift over to air, increased crit chance. Ferocious Wind is going to allow us to gain Fury based on our precision. If we have no precision on our build at that time, feel free to swap for Zephyr's Boon. This is all about the crits, but if our equipment's not there, we want Zephyr's Boon because it's going to give us two very useful boons when we grant auras to our allies, which we can do from a few sources, especially through dishing out our combos through our combo fields, which as an Ellie we have a lot of. Either is fine, go with whichever you prefer. If you don't like any of them, one with air is also fine too, because you get a little speed boost, but it's not going to help you do any more damage. Electric Discharge is one of the core reasons why we're taking air, although it's a minor trait. As soon as we attune to air, we just get free damage, especially when we're in scepter range. So if we're within scepter range, a 900 radius, like our 900 range scepter, we just get a free hit as soon as we switch over to air attunement. It's free damage. However, if you're using staff, this is no good. No good whatsoever. It can effectively be ignored. Next is Raging Storm. When we hit with a critical strike, we gain Fury, which increases our crit chance. Very simple. Aeromancer's Training just gives us more ferocity, which is going to help us with the crits. Lots more crit damage. Finally, why this is called a Fresh Air build is because of this final Grandmaster trait, Fresh Air. We recharge our air attunement whenever we crit. We also gain a bonus to our ferocity when we attune to air. So it's to keep us in air attunement. But really what we want to do is we want to stay in fire attunement, build up that might, and then swap over to air attunement. So we get the extra crit damage, we get the extra crit potential, and we basically hit with a big burst of damage while our might drops down slowly, and then we swap back to fire and build it back up again. So we build in fire, then we will swap over to air, we get our nice bonus from our fresh air, and then when all our bonuses have run down and our boons have ran out, we move back into fire. I'll demonstrate this on a golem momentarily. Now let's put this into practice with our scepter variant. This is where we're going to really see this build come into action, and as per usual we have our golem with our standard health bar and strong defiance bar, as I personally find this kind of best represents what you're going to come across in the open world by and large. There are exceptions, but in your very standard open world experience, you're going to be encountering things that are roughly on this scale, so it's a nice thing to bounce off of. So let's open up our build. We want our elementals around us. I'm going to summon a fire
Might makes me right.
elemental, and I'm going to use our regular glyph to summon the air elemental, and I'll demonstrate why quickly. We want that shocking bolt, which will do that nice little bit of defiance damage here. Now first off, we're going to just demonstrate our standard loop. This is just through auto attacking, and it's going to trigger our traits. So if we look down here, our might is really shooting up. We're now on max stacks of might, right near the beginning of combat. We're going to summon another elemental, because we want to keep summoning them whenever this comes off cooldown. And our might is staying around 25 stacks. We're not getting any more. And we're solo. What we want to do next is we want to shift into air attunement and quickly blast with a 1-2. Just draining these skills as quickly as possible, and as soon as we've switched, we've done a whole bunch of damage to the golem, and we're just waiting for our might to dissipate down to nothing once again. If you want to, we can start to break down the Defiance bar. We have a lot of tools to deal with this, as we have Gale on air and Comet on water, as well as the ability to chill on water as well. Earth as well has some nice chill and cripple to help drain those Defiance bars right down. But as we see, our might's dipped fairly low. We don't want it this low, so we want to shift back into fire and just keep these rotating through. So we keep getting that bonus power, and we keep building up that might. And that's it. That's your gameplay loop. Our main elemental has died, but that's okay. We have these ones that are just going to keep spawning and doing what we need them to do. It's really that simple. If we were taking damage, we would also be gaining health with every attack with our Signet of Restoration, because our attack loop is very short, very quick, very concise. This doesn't quite work with staff, but we'll touch on that in just a moment. Let's take a quick look at staff and a few differences between the main build and this one. First of all, we've swapped out for the Glyph of Elemental Harmony as our healing skill. This is because our staff is going to attack much slower, and it means we're getting less healing back from our auto attack. So it's a little bit more reliable to have a nice quick healing skill that we can use by ourselves, as opposed to relying on the passive heals from the Signet. This also means that this trait here is going to trigger slower, while on staff at least. The advantage is on staff we can move further away. Because staff air attacks are different, if we have a look at the skill bar, this is more based around buffing our movement and dealing CCs. So that 1-2-3 combo that we had on Scepter is no longer really viable, so we swap out to Bolt to the Heart so we can just increase our passive damage over time. While using the staff variant, I actually recommend using our Earth and Water elementals, and you'll see why in just a moment. When I hit this golem with an attack, our golem's going to move straight to melee range, and these are a little bit tougher, so they can actually take a little bit more hits in combat. If you use the water elemental, you can also heal your golems and do a nice little knockback. So you can heal all your elementals in melee range as you stay safely at a distance, not being hit by any attacks. The main advantage here is obviously the range, so we are staying far away. Our golems, well, our elementals are going to be staying in melee range, and we are just going to keep summoning them to keep the enemies away and us nice and safe. You'll also notice that while in Fire Attunement we are still gaining the benefits of our might generation, but you will also, if you keep an eye on the little counter, notice that we'll cap out at around about 18. We'll usually hit between 15 to 18 might quite comfortably. It's not to be snuffed at, it's a nice damage bonus, but it's not the same as with Scepter when we're staying on max might for as long as possible. It's just not a thing you're going to do here. So you're trading in a little bit of damage for the security of not being in your enemy's face. And there we have it. That's the Training Wheels Elementalist build. I hope this helps people in their leveling experience or in their starting adventures in the open world. And I really hope you join us next time for part 2, because this is where this build starts to get interesting, because it interacts with the elite specializations in some quite fun ways, I think. At least I feel. It's one of my favorite ones to adjust and run about with still in the open world, particularly when we're running around on Scepter. If you found this video helpful, then please leave a comment, maybe a like, share it about, help me out a whole bunch. If not, let me know down below, let me know where I can improve in future videos. But until next time, I've been Puddle of Porridge, and I'm hoping you've had a nice day.